Imagine this: on a scorching summer morning in 2023, London's Horse Guards Parade is teeming with activity. Families grip their phones and take pictures of the recognizable red-coated guards standing still like statues. With their eyes wide with awe at these living representations of British tradition, children point to the magnificent horses and giggle. Visitors from all over the world are drawn to this free show that embodies England's royal heritage, and the air is alive with conversation in dozens of languages. However, beneath this idyllic setting, danger lurks in unexpected ways. Allow me to present Arthur, our story's true star. Arthur, a 10-year-old stallion, is not your typical horse. His shiny brown coat gleams in the London sun like polished mahogany. Representing 5 years of devoted service in the Household Cavalry, one of Britain's most prestigious mounted units, he stands tall and proud. Arthur, a lively colt who was born on a Yorkshire farm with undulating hills, showed promise right away. In addition to his physical prowess, his trainers noticed that he had an almost supernatural awareness of his surroundings. Arthur's journey to the King's Guard wasn't easy. He underwent months of intense training at the Cavalry Centre, where he learned how to handle the mayhem of the busiest streets in London. He has stood his ground in front of booming military bands, marched through trooping the colour ceremonies, and remained composed during royal celebrations when fireworks burst overhead. His instincts were honed by each encounter, transforming him from a mere farm horse into a combat-ready comrade who could detect danger before people even realized it. Thomas Ellis, the 32-year-old veteran whose own tale resembles a chapter in Britain's convoluted military past, is riding Arthur. During some of the most intense times of conflict, when snap decisions could mean the difference between life and death, Thomas gained experience in Northern Ireland. He learned a great deal about reading situations and keeping composure under pressure from his experience in counter-terrorism operations. As a member of the King's Guard, Thomas now applies that same unwavering focus to ceremonial tasks that call for complete emotional control and stillness. Innumerable hours of shared responsibility have forged Thomas and Arthur's partnership, which goes beyond their professional relationship. They have developed an almost telepathic bond, as they have stood together through bone-chilling winter mornings and sweltering summer days. Thomas is aware of all Arthur's nonverbal cues, such as the soft shift of weight that denotes alertness or the tiny twitch of an ear that conveys uneasiness. This connection, which is typical of British cavalry units, reflects centuries of custom in which humans and animals unite to form a powerful whole. However, something feels different on this specific morning as the crowd grows with eager visitors and local families taking advantage of their weekend. Only Arthur seems to notice the tension that permeates the typical festival atmosphere. His ears perk up sounds and smells that aren't there. Sensing this subtle shift through the saddle, Thomas stays motionless in accordance with the stringent rules governing guard duty: no movement, no acknowledgement, and no character violations under any circumstances. Then Edward King appears. Edward, who is 45 years old, makes a menacing impression as he moves through the crowd. Despite the blazing heat, he's wrapped in a dark coat that immediately marks him as out of place. His eyes dart nervously around the parade ground with the jerky movements of someone planning something horrible, and he has beads of sweat on his forehead. Edward is more than just a disgruntled citizen. He was a former police security guard in London whose career ended in disgrace due to psychological evaluations that showed a pattern of power abuse and dangerous tendencies. After falling out of favor, Edward harbored bitterness and resentment toward the system he had previously worked for. Edward's anger has turned into something darker than the usual revenge fantasy of a fired employee, a desire to use viral social media chaos to attack the core of British institutions. He has devoted months to researching royal events, discovering their trends, and pinpointing the most vulnerable times. Although his strategy isn't very complex, it is designed to generate as much disruption and media attention as possible. Arthur's instincts take over as Edward presses toward the area where Thomas and Arthur are on guard. The combination of Edward's unpredictable movements, his weather unsuitable attire, and, above all, a strange, dangerous-smelling scent alerts the horse to a problem. Horses are trained to be partners in the cavalry, not just mounts. They frequently offer early warning systems that technology cannot match due to their innate sensitivity to threats. Thomas senses the growing tension in Arthur. Years of working together have taught him to fully trust his horse's instincts. However, he is unable to heed these warnings due to the strict regulations of guard duty. No matter what his partner or his instincts tell him, he must continue to be emotionless and statue-like. The ability to uphold protocol when every part of your body begs for action is the ultimate test of military training, and it is ingrained in every member of the King's Guard. The audience keeps moving around, utterly oblivious to the drama unfolding in front of them. To get a better view, parents raise their kids up onto their shoulders. Teens take selfies. Historical details about the guards and their horses are recounted by tour guides. The scene perfectly captures the best of London's tourist attractions, accessible history, vibrant customs, and the harmonious blending of ceremony and contemporary life. But that tranquility is about to be broken by Edward King. Arthur feels the crisis coming as he digs into his coat pocket. What follows will put their training, their teamwork, and their capacity to save innocent lives while upholding the discipline that characterizes British military tradition to the test. The straightforward but horrifying question that permeates London is whether a soldier's training and a horse's instinct can avert catastrophe when lives are on the line and seconds count. The scene is set for a confrontation that will change the perception of these ceremonial guards worldwide, from tourists to the well-trained protectors they have always been. Like London fog rolling off the Thames, the tension in Horse Guards Parade grows. With the deliberate strides of a predator pursuing his prey, Edward King navigates the crowd. This 45-year-old former security guard bears the sting of personal bitterness and career failure. His firing from the London Police Department was due to more than just subpar work, it was due to risky psychological traits that rendered him unfit for any kind of leadership role. Edward has now turned his professional humiliation into something much more sinister after losing his uniform and badge. This is not a man who wants to exact personal retribution on particular people who have harmed him. Edward's anger has grown into a more pervasive and dangerous hatred for the entire British establishment, which he feels has abandoned him. His strategy isn't intricate or well thought out. Rather, it is the crass plan of someone who is desperate for approval and attention and is prepared to cause public unrest in order to see his behavior trend on social media. Edward has persuaded himself that one spectacular deed will somehow justify his shortcomings in contemporary England, where viral moments have the power to define careers and movements. The summer heat beats down mercilessly, yet Edward persists in wearing a heavy dark coat that makes him stand out like a storm cloud against the bright tourist atmosphere. Streams of sweat trickle down his face, leaving dark patches on his clothes that would be instantly spotted as suspicious by any trained observer. His eyes are always moving, never focusing on one spot for longer than a few seconds, the classic sign of someone plotting violence while attempting to evade capture. Arthur, however, sees what the human crowds do not. This exceptional stallion has gained an almost supernatural ability to sense danger through 5 years of ceremonial duty and innumerable public appearances. As he detects Edward's scent, a blend of anxious sweat, dirty clothes, and something else, something metallic that suggests concealed weapons, his nostrils slightly widen. Horses are more than just means of transportation in the cavalry, they are also partners whose instincts frequently serve as the first line of defense against threats that humans are still unaware of. The subtle indication that Thomas has mastered the art of reading like a book causes Arthur's ears to twitch. This precise, controlled gesture conveys serious concern rather than the casual ear movement of a horse bothered by flies. Based on touch, pressure, and these minute physical clues that would be imperceptible to the untrained eye, Thomas and Arthur have developed a communication system over the years of their collaboration. Under the saddle, Arthur's muscles tense a little, sending his discomfort straight to his rider. Thomas is aware of every detail of Arthur's warning, but he is unable to follow his instincts because of the King's Guard's unwavering discipline. Regardless of the situation, the rules are unchangeable and unalterable: hold your ground, remain emotionless, and acknowledge no distractions. This is a test of centuries-old military discipline, not merely ceremonial protocol. During his tours in Northern Ireland, where hasty decisions could worsen tensions and put civilians in danger, Thomas learned the value of this kind of restraint. Thomas senses Arthur's increasing restlessness through the leather saddle, but he doesn't move at all. His posture does not change, his hands do not tighten on the reins, and his expression remains fixed in the neutral mask that all guards must wear. Thomas seems as motionless to the tourists taking pictures as the bronze statues dotted around London. His combat-trained mind, however, is processing Arthur's warnings and getting ready for any threats behind this facade. Totally unaware of the drama playing out in front of them, the crowd carries on with its happy mayhem. A German family poses for pictures while their kids giggle and attempt to attract the horse's attention. A senior British couple tells other visitors about their own military service. Australian backpackers argue over whether the guards can talk or smile. Before Edward King chooses to destroy that serene illusion, the scene embodies everything that is lovely about London's approachable past and vibrant customs. To see why Arthur's intuition is so accurate, allow me to take you back in time. When a rogue delivery bicycle crashed into the crowd at a similar ceremonial event 6 months prior, Arthur exhibited these same protective instincts. The cyclist swerved away from a group of schoolchildren as Arthur made a subtle sidestep, but Thomas remained motionless as required. The relationship between horse and rider was strengthened by that incident, which was hardly noticed by most onlookers. It also demonstrated that Arthur's defensive actions were not the result of irrational anxiety but rather of good judgment. Now, Arthur's internal alarm system reaches critical levels as Edward gets closer to their position. Through a combination of scent, body language, and that sixth sense that animals have that cannot be explained, the horse is able to determine the man's violent intentions. Thomas also notices Arthur's breathing becoming a little more labored, which is another indication that something is wrong. However, both the horse and the rider must continue to perform their ceremonial duties while getting ready for any impending danger on the inside. Edward pauses right in front of them, his hand slowly making its way to his bulky coat's inside pocket. Like a guitar string on the verge of breaking, the moment stretches. As our drama's 3 central characters confront their moment of truth, the chatter of tourists becomes inconspicuous. Edward's face twisted with the mix of anger and terror that pushes desperate men to desperate actions, his fingers closing around the grip of a handgun he has illegally purchased. Bang! As Edward pulls out his weapon and points it straight at Thomas's chest, the scene erupts into action. However, Arthur's survival instincts kick in at that very moment. The horse makes a precise, well-planned sidestep based on years of crowd control training and his innate defensive behavior, rather than roaring up like in Hollywood films. Almost imperceptible to most onlookers, this movement is precisely timed to knock Edward off balance as he pulls the trigger. Instead of hitting its target, the bullet screams harmlessly into the London sky as the gunshot cracks across Horse Guards Parade like thunder. Edward staggers back, his aim utterly destroyed by Arthur's deft but flawless move. As the crowd realizes what has happened, screams break out, but no one is hurt because of the amazing collaboration between a disciplined soldier and an astute horse that saw the danger before anyone else did. In a matter of seconds, Edward is tackled to the ground and the weapon is secured by armed police officers who are always present at public gatherings. The fact that the entire altercation, from the gun's initial appearance to Edward's capture, ends in less than 10 seconds is evidence of both Arthur's quick thinking and the security force's ability to act quickly. Thomas and Arthur stay in place, adhering to protocol despite saving countless lives through their incredible partnership, while Edward is dragged away in handcuffs while yelling unintelligible threats about teaching the establishment a lesson. An eerie silence that seems to last forever is left behind as the echo of the gunshot fades across Horse Guards Parade. Then chaos breaks out in waves, as though someone had flipped a switch. As parents pick them up and shield their eyes from the scene in front of them, children start to cry, their terrified cries piercing the air of London. Tourists who were just giggling and posing for pictures are now running in all directions, their vacation memories instantly changed into something they will never forget. A German family rushes toward the exit, dropping their pricey camera gear as they go. The father is carrying his youngest daughter and shouting his wife's name in the crowd. The sound of violence is too familiar to the elderly British couple, who are both veterans themselves, and they stand motionless for a moment before the woman starts sobbing quietly into her husband's chest. Some American tourists take out their phones to call for assistance, while others do so out of a contemporary desire to document everything, even during terrifying situations. What's amazing about this scene, though, is that no one is harmed in spite of the gunshot and the initial fear. Edward's violent outburst left no one even scratched. This miracle isn't the product of chance or luck, rather, it's the direct result of Arthur's quick decision and the years of training that equipped the horse and rider for situations like this. A flock of pigeons, scattered in surprise as the bullet intended to kill Thomas Ellis instead flew harmlessly into the summer sky above London. Despite the chaos engulfing them, Thomas and Arthur are still standing exactly where they were before the incident started, like living statues. This is the pinnacle of military discipline, not obstinacy or shock. There are no exceptions to the King's Guard's regulations for attempted murder, terrorist attacks, or other emergencies. They remain in their positions under all conditions until they are formally relieved by their commanding officers. Despite having just escaped an assassination attempt, Thomas's face is emotionless, his posture is flawless, and his hands remain steady on the reins. In contrast, Arthur exhibits the exceptional poise that distinguishes cavalry horses from their civilian counterparts. Within minutes of the incident, his breathing returns to normal. Just moments ago, his ears were twitching with warning signals, now, they stand at relaxed attention. The only tangible sign of the stress the stallion has just experienced is the slight sheen of sweat on his brown coat. He exhibits the same unwavering discipline as his human partner, however, as he stands erect, his forelegs firmly planted on the parade ground. When people realize that the immediate threat has passed, the initial panic in the crowd starts to fade. A secure perimeter is now effectively established by police officers who arrived within seconds of the gunshot, and their composed professionalism helps to reassure terrified citizens. Despite the fact that no one needs medical assistance, paramedics arrive, standard procedure for any firearms-related incident in central London. This response's effectiveness is the result of years of planning for threats to urban security of this nature. One of the first witnesses to talk to investigators is Sarah Mitchell, a Manchester schoolteacher who was in London with her family. "I saw that horse save our lives. I was standing right there with my children when that man pulled out the gun. The way the horse moved, it wasn't random. It was like he knew exactly what to do." She tells the police, still shaking from the experience, that Animal is a hero, a silent guardian who protected all of us without making a sound. Retired military veterinarian Dr. James Robertson, who was among the tourists that day, shares his professional viewpoint with anyone who will listen. His voice is full of admiration as he explains, what that stallion did was pure instinct refined by training. It's not luck, rather, it's a combination of extraordinary training and innate intelligence. Cavalry horses are trained to respond to threats, but they're also taught restraint. Arthur could have bolted, reared up, or caused a stampede that would have injured dozens of people, but instead he made the minimal necessary movement to neutralize the threat. After the incident, Horse Guards Parade starts to resemble normal within 15 minutes. The public can still access the rest of the area, but the immediate crime scene is roped off. Some visitors actually stay to observe the fallout, their relief and vacation adrenaline now mingling. Others rush off, keen to distance themselves from the violence of the morning. However, a lot of people stay because they have a renewed respect for the guards, who they once thought were only ceremonial. A crowd of children gathers at a safe distance, their fear slowly transforming into fascination as they watch Arthur stand calmly in place. After what just transpired, their parents are hesitant to allow them to get close, but they eventually come to terms with the fact that the horse is harmless. A number of people start taking pictures once more, but the atmosphere has completely changed. These are records of true heroism in action, not tourist photos of a charming British custom. Although Thomas exhibits no symptoms of trauma or injury, he is eventually given permission to dismount for a quick medical examination. A veterinary specialist who is called to every incident involving the ceremonial horses attends to Arthur while a police medic examines him. Arthur is completely unharmed, although a small scratch on his front left leg indicates that he moved quickly during the emergency, which is what everyone hopes to see when the veterinarian examines him. For the assembling crowd, this minor wound takes on strange significance. It's concrete evidence that Arthur was an active hero, who put his own safety in danger to save others, not merely a passive observer of the morning's drama. When a young girl asks her mother if the horse will get a medal like soldiers do, the innocent question becomes widely known, and many adults nod in agreement. A heartwarming human element is added to the story by the handler who shows up to console Arthur following the incident. He helps Arthur return from the high level of alertness needed during the crisis to the relaxed state required for ongoing ceremonial duty by stroking the stallion's neck gently and speaking soothing words of assurance. In keeping with his proud military demeanor, Arthur acknowledges the attention by lowering his head slightly, responding to it with the quiet dignity that permeates all of his actions. The full scope of Arthur's accomplishments becomes evident as the immediate aftermath becomes settled into standard police work and witness statements. What might have been the worst tourist area shooting in decades was averted by the instinctive movement of a single horse that lasted no more than 2 seconds. Rather than tragedy and loss, the morning yielded a tale of collaboration, training, and the extraordinary human-animal bond that is the foundation of Britain's traditions of mounted warfare. Even though the summer sun is still shining on Horse Guards Parade, the mood has completely changed. What started out as a typical ceremonial duty day has evolved into a pivotal event that will change the way the world perceives these living reminders of British military history. Arthur's story starts on a windswept farm outside of Thirsk, North Yorkshire, far from the marble monuments of Whitehall. He was the final offspring of a strong workhorse named Hazel, who was valued for her composure when spring ploughing. The farmer saw Arthur's peculiar focus as soon as he stood on wobbly legs. Arthur would turn his ears toward the sound, assessing it before responding, in contrast to other foals that would flinch at unexpected sounds. The household cavalry's talent scouts, who scour the countryside for horses that can withstand brass bands, cannon blasts, and unruly crowds without running away, found him valuable because of his poise. When Arthur was 3 years old, he was bought, put on a livestock trailer, and driven 250 miles south to the training yard at Hyde Park Barracks. Horses go through military training that is just as rigorous as human boot camp. Arthur endured what the instructors refer to as graduated stress for 6 consecutive months. Innocent distractions, such as fluttering flags and clanging feed buckets, were followed by more difficult tests, such as smoke grenades, marching bands playing loudly, and even city buses passing just inches away. Panicked horses were put back into the world, but Arthur never broke. In the stable log, one trainer, Staff Sergeant Wilkes, noted, brown stallion shows uncanny threat awareness, steps away from danger instead of into it. No one could yet know that this instinct would later save lives. In the opposite direction, starting in the middle of Belfast's Shankill Road's red brick terraces, was Thomas Ellis's route to the cavalry. His mother worked as a hospital nurse and his father as a postal worker. Neither had any military experience, but the troubles were so close that every family was familiar with violence. Thomas learned the value of maintaining composure when tempers flared as a boy while watching armored Land Rovers thunder past his school. He enlisted in the British Army at the age of 18, serving 3 tours in Northern Ireland towards the end of the war. Every tour improved his ability to watch without responding to bomb alerts, street demonstrations, and the constant threat of sniper fire. In reality, Ellis had just learned the price of acting rashly, despite colleagues' jokes that he had ice water in his veins. Thomas's commanding officer was hesitant to accept his application for the household cavalry. It must be mind-numbing for a veteran of counter-terror operations to watch guardsmen stand still for hours under tourist cameras. Standing motionless on parade is a different kind of battlefield, Thomas countered. The board approved him, and following a shortened riding course, most troopers begin at a young age. Thomas began at 29, he reported to Hyde Park Barracks, where Arthur had recently earned his basic certification. You're protecting civilians with discipline instead of rifles. It takes equal amounts of science and intuition to pair a horse with a rider. Temperament is just as important as height, weight, and riding style. Before being guided to stall number 17 by the stable master, Thomas encountered a number of horses. Arthur lowered his head in courteous acknowledgement after giving the newcomer a quick glance and fluttering his ears. After letting him sniff a gloved hand and sensing a warm breath against his knuckles, Thomas realized this was the one. They drilled together at dawn for the next 12 weeks. Making circles at a trot. Putting stand at ease into practice while it's pouring. Learning to read silent cues, Arthur's left ear twitching when he sensed a danger behind them, Thomas's right calf pressing just enough to shift Arthur's weight. The Lord Mayor's Show, a November procession infamous for confetti cannon explosions and shrieking whistles, was their first public engagement. A gas canister belonging to a vendor exploded halfway down Cheapside, making a shotgun-like echo. A number of horses became frightened, one even reared and almost unseated its rider. Arthur tensed, took a step laterally rather than forward, and stopped a loose drum cart from colliding with a marching band. Thomas trusted the stallion's instincts and never made a move. They were later praised by a parade marshal for their impossibly calm conduct, which became barracks jargon for any perfect move. The runaway bicycle incident that tourists caught on shaky phone footage happened months later. Across St. James's Park, a delivery rider lost control on wet gravel while wearing earbuds. Behind the barrier, a group of school children was skidded toward by the bike. Already on high alert due to sirens in the distance, Arthur planted like a linebacker and moved 2 hooves to the left. The rider's fetlock was clipped by the front wheel, which veered away and caused a harmless crash onto the grass. The kids applauded, and the story was featured in the tabloids with the headline, "Brave Steed Stops Speeding Steed-Less Cycle." For Thomas, it was further evidence that his partner had a unique perspective that no human could. In the cavalry, most days begin before sunrise with the routine tasks that build trust. It's not all flashbulb heroics. By 5:30 am, Thomas has reached the stable, where the cool air is scented with saddle soap and hay. He checks for cuts or heat bumps and brushes Arthur's coat until it gleams like a polished walnut. Every now and then, Arthur prods him while looking in his pockets for the apple slices that Thomas sneaks in illegally. They go to the arena at 6:15 for conditioning trots, which are 30 minutes of heart-pounding rhythms. It is a necessary, repetitive, and calming ritual. When sirens blare, a horse that bonds during the quiet hours remains calm. That connection goes beyond drills. Thomas frequently offers to take on extra stable duty just to walk Arthur in the turnout paddock, even though soldiers have varying assignments. He discusses everyday topics with the stallion, such as his mother's most recent recipe, football scores, and letters from home. Is the horse able to understand English? Most likely not. However, he is sensitive to tone, and the soft rhythm strengthens their bond. Arthur's heart rate decreases when Thomas is close by, according to trainers, demonstrating a partnership that goes beyond orders. After years of frontline stress, Thomas's mother in Belfast once questioned why he had chosen a ceremonial unit. "Ceremony is still defense, but on a different front," he retorted. "People feel secure when they see the guard." Proud that her son had exchanged rubber bullets for polished boots without losing his sense of duty, she kept that quote folded in her wallet. "If I can give a family a peaceful day in London, that's worth the stillness." Regimental social media is used by Arthur's Yorkshire breeder to track his career. She will recognize a movement she witnessed in Arthur as a foal, his tendency to turn away from sudden noise instead of running blind, when she finally sees the video of today's shooting attempt. She once made a joke about his country common sense, not realizing that it would eventually save hundreds of strangers in the capital. Thomas considers the literal and figurative miles that led him and Arthur to this precise square of London cobblestone as the sun slowly rises over Whitehall, illuminating Horse Guards Parade with long shadows. From agricultural fields and battlegrounds to royal pageantry and avoided tragedy, their paths came together with the same goal, to remain steadfast so that others could have a carefree morning. Although neither man nor horse pursued fame, destiny simply put them at the center of a tale that will be discussed in newspapers, on social media, and at family dinner tables all over the United Kingdom. Today's events were not coincidental, rather, they were the result of silent mornings, well-practiced drills, and an unspoken promise between a soldier and a stallion. In that way, the gunshot only made visible what was always there, an unbreakable bond created via perseverance, sweat, and a mutual instinct for protection. Even though the drama of the day is over, those fortunate enough to have witnessed it firsthand are only now starting to piece together the deeper story of Arthur and Thomas. Whitehall is a tangle of blue and white crime scene tape and subtly humming police generators within an hour of the shooting attempt. Beside Horse Guards Arch, a mobile command truck sits idle, its antennas protruding upward like inquisitive periscopes. Inside, a wall-mounted monitor shows Detective Inspector Claire Hartwell scrolling through the first batch of CCTV stills. Every frame follows Edward King's route that morning, starting at a hostel in Holborn at 6:12, taking the Piccadilly line, changing to the District line at South Kensington, and arriving at Westminster just minutes before he strode into the parade ground. Before Hartwell focuses on a single detail, the scene seems ordinary. Edward's phone is already out, with its camera aimed at the Palace of Westminster. He's recording the journey, practically trying to get noticed. Sergeant Ravi Patel, an expert in digital forensics, is seated at a nearby fold-out table, his fingers moving like wings across two laptops. The second device runs a decryption program that is gnawing at a pattern-locked notes app, while the first device replicates Edward's confiscated Android. Patel murmurs, he wasn't as smart as he thought. The same 4-digit code that unlocks his phone, Instagram, and Twitter. He most likely used his birthday. A file tree appears on the screen a few seconds later, with folders named Targets, Equipment, and, most telling of all, Justification. Included are screenshots of tabloid headlines about royal spending, red circle annotations on past guard stations, and a list called Impact Multipliers, which includes hashtags, influencer accounts, and suggested angles to make the story go viral. Hartwell lets out a sharp sigh. However, if Arthur hadn't moved, the bullet might have destroyed dozens of lives. He wanted a social megaphone more than a body count. Although lone actor ideology is elusive, patterns of online radicalization require attention, so the detective flags the file for the Met's counter-terror analysis unit. Thomas completes his formal statement outside the truck. He avoids dramatic embellishment and sticks to the facts. He observes Arthur's weight shift, ear flick, and the instant he sensed the horse brace. Thomas refuses to comment, citing protocol, as reporters yell questions about medals and heroism. He sees veterinarians applying a thin bandage to Arthur's small scrape as he makes his way back to the stables. The stallion snorts softly, more annoyed by the commotion than by the discomfort. Another team searches Edward's rented room a few streets away. Despite its modest size, one bed, a disorganized desk, and a cheap kettle, every surface is covered in printed forum threads denouncing royal parasites and elitist puppets. Above the desk is a hand-drawn map of central London that has been highlighted in red for police stations, green for CCTV blind spots, and blue for ceremonial routes. The smell of yesterday's curry, which Arthur surely picked up hours earlier, is still present in a discarded takeaway cup, mingling with the tang of permanent marker. Detective Sergeant Aisha Coleman discovers a notebook among the documents. One page stands out, Plan B, Smoke Bombs at Trooping Rehearsal, July 12. Coleman takes pictures. Plan B is just 4 days away. The majority of the pages ramble about perceived injustices, including a disciplinary hearing that ended his police career, a failed appeal for reinstatement, and paranoia that the top brass closed ranks. The note describes using colored smoke grenades to cause mayhem at the mall after purchasing them online. "We might have avoided a second attack," Coleman radios command. Sergeant Patel follows Edward's digital footprint further while he is back in the command truck. Over the course of 18 months, his Twitter account, @KingUndone, demonstrates a consistent transition from general frustration to radical invective. A viral video of a guard horse bucking after a tourist slapped its hindquarters clearly marks the turning point. Sensationalist accounts retweeted the video, which triggered discussions about privilege and animal abuse. With the tweet, "Maybe the country would notice real problems if these prancing ponies stopped clogging the streets," Edward joined the dogpile. His posts became increasingly sinister, turning every royal event into a waste conspiracy. Patel explores the photo gallery on the phone. He discovers surveillance footage from 2 weeks prior, including long-lens photos taken from a cafe across the street and selfies and receipts. The footage shows Thomas and Arthur on a routine patrol close to Buckingham Palace. Everyone is geotagged, time-stamped, and marked with the guard change schedule. Edward wrote, "Symbol of everything wrong," beneath one image. Hartwell is frightened. Edward wasn't merely pursuing a target, he was writing a narrative that would make the humiliation of the monarchy's discipline more powerful than violence alone. Outside New Scotland Yard, Detective Chief Superintendent Gareth Hughes is briefing the media. He attests that Edward acted alone, had an unregistered semi-automatic handgun, and was taken down in 10 seconds, a fact that is sure to be discussed. Hughes lets out a rare smile when questioned about the horse. Arthur's actions were crucial. Both the animal and his rider will receive praise from the Met. Social media is ablaze with conflicting stories as news outlets stream the update. #Hero Horse trends in the United Kingdom. Twitter in 20 minutes, swiftly surpassing #Wimbledon Finals and #London Heatwave. Every network shows slow-motion replays of Arthur's exact sidestep, which was recorded by a visitor's GoPro. Echo chambers ready for imitators and fringe accounts hailing Edward as a martyr against elitism are among the darker echoes that resound alongside the praise in comment threads. The investigation has expanded from a single shooting to a larger struggle for narrative control, and Hartwell's phone buzzes with a notification from Counter-Terror Command, monitor chatter for coordinated sympathy actions. The ballistics analysis of Edward's weapon is completed by forensic technicians at 14:35. The investigation is widened by the discovery that the serial number was filed off, but acid etching shows it originally belonged to a batch that was reported stolen from a gun club in Kent 2 years earlier. In order to compare owner interviews and find a common source of radical dissidents, detectives get in touch with Kent police. The goal is preventative: shut down any network before it blossoms. Hartwell orders simultaneous raids on 2 addresses that emerged from Edward's encrypted chats, both small apartments where he discussed equipment swaps. Thomas is standing next to Arthur's stall in the barracks, quietly observing the veterinarians as they prepare the horse for light duty. Thomas receives a sealed evidence bag from the stable sergeant, which contains the spent bullet that was found 300 meters away on a rooftop tile. Thomas flips the bag over and looks at the malformed lead that could have killed him. "They said you might want this for your report." Deciding it should be in the file rather than as a trophy, he slides it into a locker. As night falls, the skyline of London turns amber. Hartwell creates a temporary dossier that includes an ideological grievance as the motivation, public live streams to help with the planning, and a horse's instinct to stop the execution. The detective is aware that the headlines of tomorrow will fade, but the pages create a story that no fiction writer could top. Her job is to make sure that the lessons learned, such as more stringent oversight of ceremonial routes, mental health services for former officers, and digital threat assessment teams that are trained to recognize the shift from online hate speech to actual intent, last beyond the news cycle. Hartwell strolls around the now empty parade ground before signing off. As she thinks of Arthur, she pockets the one tourist postcard she discovers lying face down on the cobblestones, a watercolor of horse guards with the words, "London, where tradition rides on." While tradition endures, it also breathes, senses, and avoids danger in a flash. In addition to their broad Stetsons and steel breastplates, London's guardians occasionally don only a shiny brown coat and the calm assurance of a horse that just won't panic. A tidal wave of public outrage sweeps across every screen in the UK as Detective Hughes's press conference goes live. Slowed to half speed, the 8-second GoPro video captured by a tourist shows Edward's pistol jerking skyward, Arthur shifting one stride, and the muzzle flash innocuously arcing into blue. With the hashtag hero horse, someone uploads the bolded text, "One horse, hundreds saved," to TikTok. By sunset, the video has received 5 million views, surpassing both Cornwall storm footage and Wimbledon highlights. Grandparents, teenagers, and even city traders in Canary Wharf watch the same silent sidestep repeatedly, then lean their phones closer to watch it frame by frame as if they were learning a magic trick. The incident takes up the entire opening segment of BBC Breakfast. On Good Morning Britain, behavioral experts explain how equine fight or flight responses can outsmart human decision-making. The anchor, who typically avoids exaggeration, refers to Arthur as a national treasure in bridle and breastplate. For once, the panelists agree that the stallion is more than ceremonial decor, with a retired colonel praising the household cavalry's training regimen, and a university psychologist calling Arthur an emblem of interspecies teamwork. On 4 feet, he is operational security. The flood of praise swiftly moves from screens to the streets. The cast-iron railings outside Horse Guards Parade become an unplanned shrine during the course of the night. Along the bars, visitors tape Union Jack bunting and hand-drawn thank-you notes. The pile of produce is knee-high by mid-morning after someone leaves a bouquet of carrots tied with a red ribbon. The square is filled with off-key patriotism as a lone busker plays Rule Britannia on a battered trumpet and Londoners silently line up to sign a giant poster that reads, "We stand with the guard who stands with us." A chalkboard sign reads, "Carrot drop point, for Arthur, please wash first." The sentiment is amplified at warp speed on social media. A limited edition Arthur Apple Oat bottle with a cartoon stallion on the breastplate is created by marketing interns at a smoothie company. After giving away free #hero horse line work to the first 20 patrons, a tattoo parlor in Birmingham sells out in 90 minutes. A picture of Arthur's stable door covered in rosettes is tweeted by the Royal Park's official account, and it receives more likes than any previous wildlife post. Even Spotify takes notice. A playlist called Gallop of Glory, which is filled with triumphant movie soundtracks, is curated by someone and ends up trending in the top 10. In a rare joint statement with the royal household, the Ministry of Defence said at noon the next day, "We commend Lance Corporal of Horse Arthur and Trooper Thomas Ellis for exemplary conduct that safeguarded lives." Political pundits jump on the phrase formal recognition, making assumptions about precedent. Formal recognition will follow in due course. The Dickin Medal, the Victoria Cross for Animal Bravery, has only ever been awarded to 3 animals while they are still serving in the armed forces. In between football games, bettors all over Britain place sentimental wagers, and bookmakers cut the odds on Arthur becoming the 4th. The momentum is picked up by Parliament. An MP from Leeds asks the government if it will increase funding for military animal welfare during Prime Minister's questions. The sound of rare cross-party unity reverberating beneath the green leather benches is her co-workers banging their desks in support. A review is promised by the Defence Secretary. Later, veterans' organisations, which typically avoid activist rallies, join animal rights activists as they march outside Westminster with signs that read, "Every regiment deserves an Arthur and 4 legs, one duty." Today, the groups walk side by side, medals jangling above company insignia. Not all voices offer unqualified praise. There are conspiracy theories circulating on the internet's fringes. Some people say the video was staged, while others praise Edward as a warrior against privilege. However, the clamor of popular awe never rises above their hashtags. Despite the extremist rhetoric, the prevailing narrative is one of unity rather than division, according to Home Office analysts. When debates are held on television panels, the opposing guests seem defensive because the public's perception of a brown stallion quietly carrying out his duties has taken center stage. The whirlwind seems far away inside Hyde Park Barracks. Arthur is transferred to a stable wing that is quieter and free of tour groups and flashing cameras. Instead of drilling on the parade ground, the veterinary officer recommends a week of gentle exercise and mental decompression, a horse care jargon for grazing in a remote paddock. His coat is brushed until it shines like burnished bronze, and soldiers bring him hand-picked hay. He wears non-slip tungsten studs from the regimental farrier, which one trooper refers to as hero footwear. However, Arthur appears more intrigued by the apple slices that were smuggled into a coat pocket. Still camera-shy, Thomas gives the BBC one controlled interview. He responds in measured sentences while standing next to Arthur's paddock fence. There are no long monologues or boastful remarks. He claims, the horse did what he was trained to do. Viewers observe how Thomas caresses Arthur's forelock in the middle of his response, an unintentional act of affection that dispels any remaining doubt about their relationship. My role was to let him do it. Clip editors frame that moment as the species handshake by looping it into highlight reels. The publicity wave is born by charitable appeals. Saddles of Service, a fundraising campaign for veterinary research on stress management in working horses, is being launched by Help for Heroes in collaboration with the Blue Cross Animal Charity. In 48 hours, donations surpassed £200,000. Publishers vie for the rights to a children's picture book tentatively named Arthur Saves the Parade. Schools ask for virtual assemblies with cavalry personnel. Elementary school children mail crayon drawings of Arthur jumping over cartoon villains, each envelope addressed simply to the brave horse, London. At the same time, London tourism experiences an unanticipated surge. Families choose to see the guard change in person, and hotels around Trafalgar Square report a 10% increase in last-minute reservations. Gift shops rush to order chestnut-brown plush horses with small breastplates made of fabric. For the summer, a marketing manager for the London Eye suggests renaming one pod the Arthur Carriage. Even the city's infamously rough taxi drivers become kinder, several black taxi drivers give away free rides to anyone with a #HeroHorse badge. The regiment holds an internal honors board for the military. The board members concur that preventing civilian casualties in the capital satisfies the spirit, if not the letter, of tradition, even though the criteria for gallantry typically center on battlefield conditions. Subject to royal approval, paperwork for Arthur's PDSA Dickin Medal and Thomas Queen's Gallantry Medal starts. The same stones that rang with gunfire are now expected to resound with applause as the ceremony is rumored to take place in Horse Guards itself. 3 days after the incident, the London Eye's LED display glows gold and chestnut as evening falls. As commuters halting on Westminster Bridge raise their phones not to receive bad news this time, but to record a fleeting, dazzling moment of shared pride, the skyline reflects on the Thames like a ribbon of molten metal. Strangers sip pints while watching televisions replay Arthur's sidestep once more in pubs ranging from Hackney to Hampshire. Discipline, instinct, and the strange, inspiring fact that a 10-year-old horse reminded a tired nation that alert courage can still change the course of an ordinary morning are the topics of conversation instead of football scores and train strikes. Journalists shift their focus to politics and celebrity scandals by the end of the week, but the culture has subtly changed. Once joking that the horses were living statues, tour guides now refer to them as frontline protectors. Outside the parade ground, parents lift toddlers onto their shoulders and whisper, "That's the hero horse." The kids wave as though they are meeting a member of the royal family. In a generation full of virtual heroes, Arthur's straightforward physical deed serves as unique evidence that training and attention to detail, rather than filters and algorithms, can still take control of history and guide it in the right direction. While traffic lights along Whitehall continue to blink as London settles into a late summer dusk, the atmosphere inside Horse Guards Parade seems to be suspended in a brighter glow. The arc lamps set up for an evening ceremony that hardly ever takes place outside of combat citations, a dual commendation, one for a soldier and one for the horse that became a household name, reflect the freshly cleaned cobblestones. A measured stillness, exactly the quality that saved lives 9 days ago, replaces the marching band and the roar of cannon. With a bronze service book in hand, the commander of the household cavalry advances and calmly narrates the series of events that have already been seen 1,000 times on television. Then he says one sentence that is more powerful than the gleaming medals on each of the chests. When the easy option is to panic, he says, true courage is the decision to stay steady. Quietly, Thomas Ellis takes his ribbon, salutes, and moves back to stand next to Arthur, who is given a small silver badge bearing the PDSA crest and an embroidered blue sash. The regiment prefers respect to spectacle, so flashbulbs are prohibited even though cameras click. Arthur remains still, but anyone who has spent the last week learning to read his cues can see the calm eyes, the relaxed ears, and the assurance that his partner is close at hand. This ceremony is more than just show for the troops lining the quadrangle. In a city that frequently seems to be ruled by noise and speed, it is a confirmation that the very qualities instilled in them, controlled readiness, patience, and restraint, still matter. Senior officers open a corridor for the pair to meet East London visiting students after the formalities are over. Maya, 12, comes forward first, holding a notebook of questions for her report on civic studies. She hesitates before asking, her palm resting close to Arthur's shoulder. Thomas nods. "Thank you for keeping everyone safe," Maya whispers as she places her hand on the warm coat. It's the most straightforward way to sum up the past week, and it says more than any headline. Thomas sits for one last interview a little later, which is necessary before the media's attention eventually shifts elsewhere. Just a folding chair under a makeshift canopy, no glitzy studio. When social media feeds shift back to football debates and train strikes, the journalist asks what lesson the public should learn. Thomas responds without planning. He asserts that extraordinary tools are not necessary to prevent tragedy. He explains that Arthur's sidestep was not a result of luck, but rather of thousands of uneventful patrols where nothing happened except for a shared habit of noticing small irregularities, a strange scent, a tightened rein, a tourist leaning too far over the barrier. You need discipline that stops you from acting out of fear, and you need instinct you can trust because you trained for it every day, he says. Until it matters, he continues, preparation appears dull. Lecture halls on the other side of the Thames continue that theme. When talking about soft target protection, security experts bring up the incident. Although they stress the importance of technology, human-animal teams provide a sensory range that machines cannot match. Using Arthur as a metaphor for decentralized decision-making, leadership consultants take a different approach. One slide with the now iconic still image of the horse in mid-step reads, "Trust the teammate closest to the data." Even mindfulness coaches participate, teaching their clients to recognize their own ear flick moments, tiny internal cues that something is either right or wrong. However, the most profound influence is revealed in the personal reflections of regular people, outside of formal discourse. Because she recalls Thomas' decision to not draw his weapon, a bus driver in Croydon refrains from cursing at a careless cyclist. After discovering that Edward's violence started as untreated resentment, a teenage boy in Sheffield makes the decision to continue going to therapy. Once doubtful of military pageantry, a mother in Bristol saves money for a weekend getaway so her kids can see the guard change firsthand and discover what it means to be patient. Even the household cavalry adjusts. Training officers add scenario drills where riders must rely on equine cues under crowd pressure and update manuals to emphasize Arthur's case. New recruits discover that silence can be a sign of bravery. Additionally, the regiment conducts research on the heart rate variability of horses during urban deployments in collaboration with an Animal Behavior Institute. According to preliminary research, the most successful horses share Arthur's baseline calm, supporting the notion that temperament is just as important as armor. In the meantime, the Metropolitan Police launches a pilot program, in which liaison officers are tasked with keeping an eye on fringe online forums in real time in order to identify the turning point between online anger and offline danger. The project is named King, a nod that turns Edward's last name from a grievance symbol to a preventative tool. Analysts are aware of the irony, as even one lost chance for mental health treatment can make national news. Arthur maintains a routine that predates the hashtags, morning groom, exercise trot, afternoon graze, despite all of these initiatives. Guides have changed their scripts, but tourists still congregate at the railing. They refer to the horses as active security assets, partners bound by unseen contracts of trust, rather than as historical decor. Youngsters wave, Arthur makes the bare minimum of a gesture to acknowledge them without violating rules, flicking an ear or lowering his head. Thomas's mother comes to visit from Belfast on a calm Sunday. The parade ground she used to watch on TV is now marked with personal significance as she walks it. A sudden wave of comfort washes over her as she stands by the railing, watching her son and his horse in ceremonial file. She now realizes that uniformed service can also mean measured guardianship that is fostered by training and empathy, whereas for decades she feared it meant constant danger. Calm can be stronger than force, she writes on postcards she mails home. News cycles change over the course of weeks, but the story doesn't go away. The clip, a horse, a gun, a single step is always used in response to commentators who argue that British customs are out of date. Its strength lies in its conciseness. The audience naturally understands that heroism developed over invisible hours of preparation rather than blossoming in that moment. The lesson is profound: greatness frequently lurks within habits we are tempted to eschew. Thomas and Arthur learn that the Royal Victorian Order will recognize their service in a private chapel audience as fall approaches. No interviews were planned, no cameras were permitted, just a sovereign expressing gratitude to two guardians whose most important attributes are hidden from view. Thomas muses that the honor seems fitting. Although public acclaim can be motivating, quiet, routine acts that no one records are where lasting safety thrives. Therefore, the story ends with a persistent note of vigilance rather than with fireworks. It serves as a reminder to Londoners and those listening from other countries that sometimes the distinction between a typical day and irreparable loss is as thin as a horse's hoof. It exhorts all professions and households to value preparedness over instinct, observation over presumption, and cooperation, between species or among co-workers, over lone wolf bluster. Because ultimately, the greatest strength comes from the consistent alignment of instinct and discipline to stand up for principles greater than oneself, not from strength or steel. If this trip inspired you, please hit like, subscribe, and share the lesson, because a calm action today could determine your safety tomorrow.